Good evening, everyone. Happy Tuesday, and welcome to another episode of the Golden Goal Fantasy Football Podcast. As usual, I'm joined by Sam. How are you getting on, mate? How are you getting on in Sky in particular?
Um, yeah, we just had a look at the points, haven't we? So not amazing, but then it's super condensed at the moment. So I'm really not trying to look at rank so much and getting too disheartened. I'm looking at team structure and setting myself up for the future. So I had an all right week. The Haaland missing out on Haaland last midweek kind of killed me a little bit. Brought him back in this week amongst a couple of other changes and didn't have anyone of any note on that Sunday when like Brighton and United assets did kind of well. So that sort of shot me down a little bit down the table. But apart from that, it's like all right, I guess.
Yeah, similar story for me, really. Didn't have Haaland at the same time that you didn't have him, so that hurt me. I had to captain Salah last week, and there was quite a major swing there. And I had Koulibaly in my team for his red card and his blank against Southampton. And then I thought it would be a good idea to transfer him out to Harvey Barnes for the United Leicester single when I should have gone for Rashford. So yeah, I've not had an ideal start, but I think it's just down to, I wouldn't say luck as such, because I think maybe the Harvey Barnes move was a bit rash, but again, it was only one transfer. Just think I've been unlucky on some of the calls, really. Oh, and I had Son over Kane as well, so that's killed me too.
Yeah, like we said just before we came on air, like you can have like 8 or 9 of the template players and then a couple of the swing players where you might go Kane, I might go Son. That's where the kind of points difference is. Remember, we had Allison for the first 3 games where some of the players went with Dean Henderson and Henderson smashed it and Allison got next to nothing. So these little things do really make a difference. But then when you look at the points table within reason for the players, majority of the engaged players, it's not massive point differences
No.
compared to rank. We just looked then, didn't we? And me and you were like, I'm 6 or 7 thousand ranks ahead of you, and it's like 10 points or something, 12 points. So absolutely nothing. So as I said at the start, I think it's about not losing your head right now and getting yourself set up for the future. And I'm trying to avoid any bandwagons and stuff, but it's obviously a couple of players that I've got the eye on, as I'm sure you do as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think some of those players we'll get onto as well, because I think, well, both coming out of last weekend and the last couple of weeks, I think there are some new and emerging sort of midfield enablers that might not have had much credit recently. And one of them, particular McAllister, that we'll talk about, really shone at the weekend. But I think beyond that, there's a stable baseline of some bonus points from him as well. But we'll talk about him as we go along. I thought what we could do to start, mate, is just go through last week's results. I think if we discuss the games in a bit of detail, and then we can just talk about some of the players that we thought performed quite interestingly. So I think first talking point was the Everton 0-0 with Liverpool. From my perspective, obviously, I think this is one of obviously Liverpool's first clean sheets of the season. The game sort of went as I expected it to go, really, which is why I brought in Haaland. I just thought it'd be really cagey, and I'd say wasn't particularly cagey, but it was low scoring. Obviously, it was 0-0, so I'm quite glad I captained Haaland there. I mean, from your perspective as a Liverpool fan, I don't say I'm that close to selling Salah, but I think it's certainly an option at the moment where you could go without him. What do you think to that?
Yeah, he doesn't look hugely involved as such. Um, but I think someone mentioned it on the chat. One, two, three, four, five, 6 games, and 3 of those 6 he had 8 pointers. It's like he could just explode at any time. But we said this last season, and he went off a right old run of blanks. I would just say though, the up and coming fixtures, if you're going to jump off of him, I would be doing it very soon. If there's a hop on, hop on, hop off, hop on for someone else, Wolves, which they're fairly decent at home, but there could be they're fairly decent defensively, and it's at Anfield, so still class that as a decent Liverpool fixture. But then it's Chelsea, Brighton, Arsenal, City, West Ham as Liverpool's following 5. I wouldn't be adverse to someone jumping off of him for someone else who's a is a really good opportunity. What I would say is Thiago's back in training, and I think I've heard he's sort of due back to start tomorrow night. I think the big issues lie in central midfield. Um, and with Liverpool at the moment. And so I think once you see Thiago come back and now Jota's back in, I'm not saying it's going to be a miracle fix. I don't think it will be by any stretch of the imagination, but I think there will be some more chances created for Salah. Obviously Diaz is fairly new, Nunes is new. This is a fairly new front line, so it might take a little bit of time for them to gel together.
Just gonna.
Um,
Oh, sorry, mate. Go on.
Yeah, I think I'll be keeping hold of Salah at the moment, but not entirely sure on that five fixture run if there's a better option for like a 4 or 5 games, and then come back on Salah a little bit later on. What's your thinking?
I think I'll just hold him. I've already used enough transfers, so I think I'll just hold him. To be honest, with my thoughts with Salah is sometimes he actually plays better against the good opposition. Like against Man City, he regularly scores in that game from what I remember, and he scores absolute worldies against them. So I think in terms of fixture-proof attacking players, Salah's right up there, and he can score against anyone. So I don't think in terms of Salah there's a fixture I wouldn't bother captaining him on, to be honest. It's just that Haaland is doing so much better. So whenever Salah and Haaland play on the same day, you've got to go for Haaland.
Salah isn't actually the worry for me, strangely. I think if you look at him in terms of effort and intent and everything, he's all there. It's just the team
Hmm.
is the issue. I think you're absolutely right on what you said about City, and he scored against Chelsea last season. He scored obviously a really nice goal against City. He's had a couple of penalties against City, and of course, penalties can be a really nice route to points, even when they don't deserve it. So I can see merits for the brave that want to hop off, and for the likes of maybe yourself, where you've used quite a few moves, you're just going to leave him. And he is a season keeper, isn't he, Salah? You know how many points he scores every season, and inevitably, I do think Liverpool will get better. I don't know if they're going to be that team this year. Honestly, I don't think they are. But I still think they're going to be better than 90 to 95% of the other teams in the Premier League. But not to the levels that we've seen from the last couple of seasons, potentially.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I don't think there's too many talking points on Wolves v Southampton, but I just had a look. Excuse me. I just had a look at the Wolves defenders' passing numbers, and it didn't look like Kilman or Collins got passing bonus in that game. And I think Southampton's a game you'd expect them to get it in. So, yeah, I guess owners would just take the clean sheet with them, right? But yeah, just want to know that they didn't get passing bonus.
Yeah, have they got a little bit of a tricky? Have they got a trickier run coming up now,
Let's have
Wolves?
a look. See. So in Wolves, yeah, they really do. They've got Liverpool, Man City, West Ham, Chelsea in their next four. So yeah, they got quite a tough run.
Yeah, nothing there from Southampton of any note, was there, Tom?
No, I don't. I'm not in the nicest way possible. I don't think I'm particularly interested in Southampton assets. Next game being Tottenham winning 2-1 against Fulham. Obviously the token Harry Kane goal, which I'll very happily take. But I think the player that's not surprised, well, certainly has surprised me compared to expectations at the start of the season. But yeah, Mitrovic has just been an absolute beast, hasn't he? And if he didn't miss a penalty against Wolves, he'd have scored a goal in every game so far.
Yeah, it's amazing. He just, like you said last week, he's bullying defenders. He's looking unbelievable in the air. Fulham are playing well. They're confident. They're competing really well in games. I'm seeing a lot of people that are thinking about bringing him in, a hop off maybe to Zeus at some point, and into Mitrovic. I don't hate it at all. And really, the face of the game at the moment is really not what we've seen over the past couple of years, where like big at the back is just not working, is it? As well, sorry. And we've got, I would say, there's five or six strikers that you could have in your team, and obviously we've only got 3 slots, so it's really good to see like these kind of mid-priced strikers doing really, really well.
Yeah, we'll get on to Tony in a bit, but yeah, I think like you're saying, there are five strikers that I want in my team. You know, you got
Yeah,
Kane, Haaland, Jesus, and then there's Tony and Mitrovic as well. I think all five of those
definitely.
are very viable, and you just got to pick three of them, really, haven't you?
Yeah, I go into the Tottenham game. No passing bonus for the Spurs back line. They've got a bit of a trickier run coming up now, haven't they? With City, Leicester, Arsenal, Brighton, Everton, and then United. I'm thinking about hopping off Eric Dyer
Yeah, same here,
to
mate.
an enabler, which I think we'll talk about later on, won't we?
Yeah, same here. Next one being, and unfortunately for Dean Henderson, this game didn't go particularly well for him. Forest 2, Bournemouth 3. Yeah, I think I'm nervously going to hold Dean Henderson for his captaincies, but yeah, he's not. The Forest aren't looking too great defensively at the moment, I wouldn't say.
No, I was going to say like there's sort of four or five captaincy options there, isn't there, for Forest? That's the problem, isn't it?
One of them is against Fulham as well. I haven't. I might have the grid up here actually, but yeah, one of them is against Fulham, and at the moment I don't have a plan to bring in Mitrovic because there's an Arsenal captaincy day somewhere along the line there. So I can't justify getting rid of Jesus for Mitrovic because I want to captain Jesus against Brentford. So
Yeah.
I'm nervously going to have to captain Dean Henderson against Fulham. And if people can fit in Mitrovic, then fair play to you. But I just don't think I can get him in my team at the moment.
Yeah, I think I mean I'm on Allison at the moment, but I'm not really seeing where else I want
I think
who else
um
would
I
want
think
to
Nick
bring
Pope
in.
is the standout in the game this year. I think he's 7.1 million, which feels a little. Well, it's obviously a little more expensive than Dean Henderson, but I think Nick Pope's the man this year. I think he's the one. I think he's got saves bonus pretty much every game. And Newcastle are seeming to be as good as they were last season defensively at St James's Park. It's just away from home they seem to concede a bit more.
Yeah, but if he's picking up, they're just a little bit more solid than Nottingham Forest, aren't they,
Yeah.
defensively? So that first single is Monday the 12th, Leeds Forest. Obviously, there is an option there, Tom, isn't there, for Tyler Adams
hmm
as a potential enabler to cover you for that captaincy from Leeds. I know he's going to come up later on, wasn't he? Is there ways round this? Is there ways round going Forestless for these four or five games, do you think?
I think so. So certainly Tyler Adams, you can buy him as long as, for my opinion, I wouldn't bring in a player to transfer in for that game to transfer out again. That's a no-no. But if you
Yeah.
brought in Tyler Adams, maybe for Dyer as a cheeky enabler, he's Tyler Adams' bonuses points are pretty good. He's got double bonus in the last two games, albeit they weren't against particularly difficult opposition, but he's got passing and tackles together in the last two. So you'd expect him to achieve that again on the 12th. And then
Then you've
Forest's
got
next single is the 16th, where they got
yeah.
Fulham. Obviously, Mitrovic is a strong option for that one. Game week
But
8's
like you said, if
international.
you want Jesus, that's where the issue lies, isn't it? Because you're probably not going to want to ditch Kane or Haaland. They're kind of I've had enough of doing hokey cokey with them two unless there's an injury. Um, so it would be a case of taking out. In our case, it'd be taking out Jesus, wouldn't it? But then he's got again. I haven't got that my fixture, my captaincy form with me that I had last week. But
So I think it's doable. So Sunday the 18th, and I'll put the fixture on the screen. So Sunday the 18th is the tricky day, if you like. So if you took out Jesus for Mitrovic on the 16th, you don't have Jesus captain against Brentford. But if you hold Salah, you can captain Salah against Chelsea, which I think is pretty
they're
viable, to be
conceding
honest.
goals, mate, at the moment, aren't they, Chelsea?
So I
There's
don't,
every
yeah.
ability Liverpool score.
And Brentford, they're not the most solid defensively, but they do look pretty good. So I think Salah v Chelsea and Jesus v Brentford is quite close, which makes me think I could sell Jesus for Mitrovic on the 16th. I think it's viable.
Yeah, dare I say it, if anyone's got a kind of United asset there, like a Rashford or whatever, that Sunday versus Leeds at Old Trafford could be covered by Rashford. So it depends what you're looking for. Like that Friday the 16th, you could play Polinia, and judging on Polinia's consistency, you're going to come out with 8 to 10 points there as a captaincy. I mean, if you feel like Fulham are going to score against Forest, then Dean Henderson's probably only going to maximally get 4 or 5 points if they concede and make a couple of saves there. So, like I said, it depends what you want from what you believe is going to happen and what you deem valuable for a transfer or not using the transfer. Basically, is what I'm trying to say. I think Fulham will probably score against Forest that day, the way that the Forest are leaking. So it would lend me to to think, will I want to bring in Mitrovic and then captain him that night? There's a potential for a little bit more of an explosive return there. Um, and then, yeah, stick the armband on Salah on Sunday the 18th. And especially as like Paul McNulty says, on days where it's quite split in terms of there isn't a really strong captaincy option, is a good opportunity for you to maybe go with that other option. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely, definitely. I think not that anyone would be. I don't think anyone would be selling Jesus this coming weekend because they've got
No.
Everton on Sunday, and I think he's the outstanding captain there.
The only thing is you've then got Leicester versus Forest on the 3rd of October. This is what I'm getting at and why I think it's just
Could you skip it?
you could skip it, couldn't you? But Leicester look, I mean, Brennan Johnson could be a really good shout that day, couldn't he? They're both looking leaky, so you could see sort of 2-2, 3-3 there, couldn't you? Which is a bit of a worry if you've got like a Madison or a Barnes or a Brennan Johnson or something like that, where both teams kind of score a couple of goals. Again, that does not strike me as a defensive asset captaincy day, does it?
Not right now, no.
So that could be a skip, but if you've got like a Barnes or a Madison, it might well be worth a hold to then. And then there's the Monday the 10th of October as well versus
Oh, I missed that. I
Villa.
forgot that one. Yeah, I think. To be honest, I'd say that's a potential skip as well. If you didn't own anyone, you could probably skip those two and get away with it. To be honest.
But the flip side, Tom, is if you make one transfer, you cover 4 to 5 captaincies.
Yeah,
And in your case, you don't even need to because you've got Henderson. I mean,
I've
I've
got
got
Henderson.
Allison at the moment, but with Liverpool's fixtures, it just makes such sense for me to bring in Henderson. But realistically, what kind of points return am I going to get over those 4 or 5 games, judging on how they're looking at the moment?
I think I'll. Well, I've already got Henderson. I think if I didn't have him, I'd still buy him, and then I would also buy Mitrovic on the 16th.
Yeah,
I think that's what I'd do, and then you can still captain Henderson for the other three fixtures. So
yeah,
I'd captain him against Leeds, I'd captain him against Villa, and I'd captain him against Leicester, and then whatever I got out of those games, I'd take.
yeah. I think that's a viable shout. And I was about to say maybe I might look at something similar by bringing Mitrovic in and then sticking the armband on him on the 16th.
It will be interesting to see how many. I know we've spoken a long time talking about Fulham and Forest, haven't we? But it's an important conversation. It will be interesting to see how many people have Mitrovic come the 16th of September. So I think there's a real call to get him and go without Jesus because I think most managers are going to have three up front. So it's going to be interesting to see if they bite the bullet, get rid of Jesus, or stick with Jesus on the Sunday.
Yeah, yeah. It's going to be some split decisions and again some coming away from a really fixed template, which is good for the game.
That's what we want. I'll get rid of that fixture grid. I think we already
Oh, we,
covered Newcastle and Palace. The one thing I just wanted, well, with Nick Pope really being the outstanding one, the one thing I did just want to check was Palace defenders passing. Doesn't look like they got it again against Newcastle, which is interesting. They seem to have died off that a bit, don't they?
yeah, yeah, they do. I do like the thought of Zaha moving forward. I think they've got a couple of tricky games and a really nice run. So United, Brighton, Chelsea. I think Zaha does love a goal against United, doesn't he?
I think he can
Um,
score. Just the way he plays on the counter, I think he could score against anyone. And he's got penalties as
and
well,
then
so
he has, yeah, and he's playing really well. And then there's a really nice run, Tom. So after Chelsea from the 9th, again, we'll probably discuss this at later time, but there'll probably be a hop on somewhere. Um,
that's a great run, isn't
Leeds,
it? Yeah.
Leeds, Leicester, Wolves, Everton, Southampton, West Ham, Forest,
And then it's the World
Fulham,
Cup after Forest
Bournemouth.
there, yeah.
That is that's a dream run if he's still playing well. Because well, you go in there, who's leaky? Well, Leeds are leaky, Leicester are leaky, Everton are leaky, Southampton a bit hit and miss. Um,
Same with
West
West
Ham,
Ham.
yeah, picking up a little bit now, which is good, but not by not means looking amazing. Forest leaky, Fulham concede goals, and Bournemouth leaky. So it's like a real opportunity there, isn't there?
Yeah,
I
definitely.
think a few people will be on him. Just when I own him, he just doesn't do anything.
He's pants in it, yeah. I do the same happens to me. Next one being Chelsea West Ham. Try to avoid talking about VAR calls, but Chelsea, I still think that I'm going to buy Fofana, and it sounds.
Have
I
you not
think
got him yet?
it
I thought you
sounds.
had him.
No, not quite yet. My plan was to buy him on Saturday against Fulham. I still think he is a good option. I think he will play regularly, and even if he doesn't keep a clean sheet every game, I still think 7.5 for almost guaranteed passing bonus in that Chelsea back three is good
Well,
value.
I brought him in, mate.
You got
I
him.
brought him in. That's in the team sheets. Yeah. So I took Van Dijk out prior to the Everton game, which I knew there'd be a possibility of a clean sheet, but my thinking was that I wouldn't captain Van Dijk. Would have captained Haaland, so it actually ended up I was like a couple of points up, but now I've got Haaland for the future. And so the make weight for that was I had to downgrade someone else. So Bruno G was still injured, so I moved Bruno G to Fofana. Fofana got something like 80 odd passes, I think.
Hmm.
So he got me a five pointer at 7.5, and I watched the highlights of the game, and he had a really solid debut. So looks like he's hopefully going to be nailed in that Chelsea back five or back three or however he plays it. And like you just said, mate, I will take 4 or 5 points every week for £7.5 million player. And inevitably, there's going to be a point where you're going to want to captain a Chelsea player as well. Um, Let alone the fact that they will definitely find some form at some point and
Oh
start
yeah,
keeping some
definitely.
clean sheets. So the only concern with me for Fana was like playing time. So that's just the one thing to watch. He played. They've lost this evening in the Champions League, but he's played the full 90.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on there with Chelsea. I worry
So
for Tuchel.
really,
Maybe they might think that it's doing good for the club to get rid of him and switch it up, which would be interesting.
well, he dropped Mendy, didn't he,
Did
for
he? I didn't
tonight?
see that.
So Kepa played in goal. Then he played a back three of Azpilicueta, Wesley Fofana, and Koulibaly, and then Reece James wide right. Ben Chilwell came back in tonight. Kovacic was back in the middle with Mason Mount, and then he played Havertz, Aubameyang, and Sterling as a front three. So it's a
That's a
really
pretty
nice
good
team.
team. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's only a matter of time, Tom. I know I think we've probably said this since pod one or pod two or whatever, but I do think they will start to pick up a little bit. I just don't think he knows his best. I know he's had a few injuries, but it doesn't seem like he knows his best team. He seems to do a bit of chopping and changing, doesn't he?
And I think, well, the team you mentioned tonight, there's a few new players in there, players that haven't played for a while. So yeah, like you say, it's just a matter of time before they get settled and start looking good again.
Definitely.
Next game being Brentford 5, Leeds 2. Two outstanders for me from that game. Obviously, Ivan Toney with a hat-trick. And from Leeds, he's got three. Sinistera, he looks pretty good. Scored on
Does.
both of his debut start and his second game, obviously against Leeds. He scored in both times he started, and then Tyler Adams as well. He's looking pretty good as an enabler. So he's played his games so far are Wolves, Southampton, Chelsea, Brighton, Everton, and Brentford. And he's either got passing bonus or tackle bonus in each of those games. And against Everton and Brentford, he's got double bonus.
Yeah, so that's another Abler that's emerging. So anyone's looking like where they want to free up some money. I just think it's like if you need to downgrade someone, you want to free up some money. It's just a move whenever, isn't it? Move them in. If
Definitely.
you see in regular bonus and you like the look of someone like that, just get them in. Because if it what it allows you elsewhere is so good.
Next up being Villa and Man City. I don't think there were too many. Obviously, the result of the game is a bit of a talking point in that City dropped points. But I
Hmm.
think there's not too many talking points other than Haaland just getting what feels like a token goal now.
Yeah, 10, was it 10 goals in five games, six
Absolutely
games.
insane.
Like
Yeah,
that.
6 games.
Yeah. As long as he's playing and fit. Pep made some funny comments there, didn't he? Like he's young, he recovers well. Like it was all the right noise, wasn't it? He came out about him. He did play 90 against Villa, didn't he? Because obviously game state suggested, well, forced basically Pep to keep him on to try and win the game. From a fantasy perspective, this is not from a Liverpool fan perspective. You want the game to be wrapped up so that you can probably pull him off after two or three goals, so that he gets those 25, 30-minute rests to then start the next Premier League game. Because if he's accumulating 25 to 30 minutes over 3 games, that's a whole entire match of recovery, isn't it? Um, Obviously, from a Liverpool perspective, and more importantly, as from a Liverpool perspective, although I don't think we're in the race for the title at the moment, it's nice to see him play the 90, Tom.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the Sunday games. First up, we had Brighton 5, Leicester 2, and then United 3, Arsenal 1. I guess main talking point in the Brighton Leicester game were how blooming leaky Leicester seemed to be at the back.
Oh, they're just the side and everything's poor though, isn't it?
It's all over the
Defensively,
place, yeah.
yeah, there's some financial problems, I think, isn't there, in terms of like signing players and stuff like that. So, um, yeah, they're a club. Well, they're bottom of the table, aren't they? So it's a club in that are really struggling.
And
They,
Not
they,
Leicester, Brighton are the total opposite, operating on
yeah,
their small cash, but doing really well. And I think, well, Trossard, Gross, and McAllister and Casado all doing quite well as well.
yeah, and
McAllister,
also Tom,
yeah, go
a
for it.
return, as we suggested, a return of passes for the defenders. So
Yep,
Lewis Dunk. Oh, Lewis Dunk. Yeah, so Dunk got tier two and Webster got tier one. And looking at Webster's last one, two, three, last five returns, seven, seven, six, four, and then three. The four and the three being when they conceded goals, but both got passing tiers, whereas the previous sevens were clean sheets. That's quite nice value for a £7.4 million defender, as we talked about on the pod last week, didn't we? So I think kind of Webster, McAllister, Gross, Dunk, Casado, Trossard, should all be like back into people's thought
there are like
processes.
10 players across the game, 7.5 or below, that you could go with at the moment.
Yeah.
And trying to tell people which one to go for, I think, is impossible. There are just so many options now.
I like I do like say like a McAllister, especially for the fixtures they've got coming up, where McAllister's picked up bonus. So he didn't start. He started the first game and didn't get anything, but then he picked up tackles tier two versus Newcastle, 4 pointer with the yellow card. Passes tier one, and then the goal against West Ham. Tackles tier one against Leeds. Tackles tier one and a goal versus Fulham, and then shots tier two and 2 goals versus Leicester. He does get a yellow card quite often, but that's obviously at the expense of trying to get tackles. But with the fixtures coming up, Tom, so Bournemouth and Palace aside, Liverpool and Tottenham, and then City a little bit down the line would probably suggest to me like would be nice for kind of tackles bonus potentially.
Yeah, yeah, I
And
can't
then
can't
obviously
argue with that.
Bournemouth, Palace, Brentford, and Forest are quite nice games, maybe from a bit more of an attacking perspective. So I really wish I brought him in for Dyer. I know like hindsight's a wonderful thing on that Sunday.
I didn't even
Because I
think
was
about
thinking
him, to be
about
honest,
taking.
mate. It was one of those moves where I saw people make it, and I was like, "Wow, you are miles ahead of me in terms of thinking." Because I just didn't even consider him, to be honest.
No, because he's on penalties, isn't he?
Yeah, pens and free. Well, obviously, he scored the free kick in the
Yeah.
game against Leicester, and he's on pens. Yeah,
So that just gives you you can have a non-penalty XG of next to nothing, but you're still going to probably pick up three, four, five, 6 goals a season if you get a couple of penalties, and then especially when you're on, like I said, set pieces as well. Um, like stroke of genius from Paul bringing him in on the Sunday for that and getting his just rewards. Hence why he's an extremely good Sky manager. So yeah, you're absolutely right there, Tom. It really didn't. It loosely crossed my mind, but not enough to make the move.
And then just looking, because you mentioned XG and non-pen XG there, I've got, well, FPL related, I've got to choose this week between Gross and McAllister for my transfer. And I had a look on FBref, by the way, fbref.com is a good website for checking out like XG data for every player. Had a quick look on there for McAllister. So XG for the season, he's on 2.7 because of his pens and free kicks, but non-penalty XG is zero point 0.3 in the 6 games. But because he's got the pens and free kicks, it's blown his stats up.
And but as we talked about off air, I think because he's getting like tackles and
Yeah,
passes bonus like here and there. In fact, he's had bonus every game.
he's
By
had
the United.
every, obviously there's no man of the match before, apart from clean sheets because he can't get them. He's had every kind of points you can get in the Sky.
Yeah, and the only game he hasn't picked up an actual bonus in is the Manchester United game, which is the first game of the season. Finished on zero because he got an own goal, didn't he? So apart from that, he's returned. So when we're looking at players around that price, I think he's actually a no-brainer if he's picking up multiple routes to points in bonus and he's on pens and free kicks. I think it's a no-brainer.
Yeah,
It's just a shame we didn't think about this prior to Sunday.
I think it was a bit early, to be honest, for me to make that move after all the transfers I've been doing. And then the final one, United against Arsenal. I think, well, main talking point being probably Rashford there.
Yeah, like you're a United fan. Like I didn't watch the game, but my thinking with Rashford is he suits games where they can score goals, like he basically scored back on the winning the ball back and then on the counter attack.
Yeah,
So
definitely. Let's
did it
have a
against
look.
Liverpool.
Yeah, did it against Liverpool and did it against Arsenal, two teams that traditionally play quite a high line that Rashford can expose. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I completely agree.
Do you think he's a good option, or what's your
I'm
thinking
just
on
going to
it
have a
again?
look at his next fixtures. So next fixtures are Palace, who could score against. Leeds, who I think, well, under Bielsa, they did play a high line, obviously. Not quite sure what they're like under their new manager, but just through their leaky nature, I think he's a good option in that game. So they've got Palace, Leeds, then Man City. And obviously Man City look really good. Well, do they? They've been conceding goals, to be fair. And Rashford does do quite well in the Man City fixture, traditionally. Then they've got Everton, Newcastle, Spurs. Oh, the Chelsea game to be rearranged. Yeah, I think Rashford's a good option. The only thing to consider with him is now they've got Ronaldo, Martial, Anthony, Sancho, Elanga, who 5 players for 3 positions. I think he's warranted, his position in the team is safe for now because he's playing well. But I think if he has 1 or 2 bad games, he'd be straight on the bench. So I just want to think about.
I definitely see him as a viable punt. I mean, he's another good Eric Dyer replacement, isn't he? If you were looking for that kind of, you had the structure to allow it. He's 8.1. It was, we talked about at the start of the season. He's always going to be a good option at some point. A forward playing for a top 6 team at 8.1 million pounds in midfield is always going to be a good option. And the World Cup just around the corner, he's going to be desperate to get himself into the squad, isn't he?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. We spent a while talking about those results there, but I think that just helps us talk about other things as well, doesn't it? So hopefully that was a useful chat for everyone. And I think we've covered, well, talked about, mentioned all of these players on this list so far, but I've done a really simple filter. I've not gone into any kind of stats. I've filtered by 7.5 and below midfielders here and just picked out the top 4. I think, to be completely honest, we've already discussed them. So top of the list in terms of points is McAllister, obviously coming off last weekend with 2 goals. Could have had did he get 2 or just the 1? I can't remember now. But whatever happens, he had an amazing game. Scored 2 goals, and then also could have had 1 that was disallowed. So he could have had a hat trick in that game. I think he just, like we said, he's got every kind of points you can get in Sky for someone in his position. So I think that makes him a really well-rounded option going forward. Then you got Pascal Gross. Again, I think in Sky, I think McAllister's a better pick for the the bonus potential. But with Pascal Gross, it's looking like he's playing more advanced, and certainly his non-penalty expected goal stats, etc., are much better than McAllister's. I think we mentioned Tyler Adams already, but yeah, double bonus in the last two, and I don't think he's had a single blank yet this season. And then Polina is pretty similar to Tyler Adams, really consistently getting tackles bonus, and he scored a goal in one of the games as well. Any others that you want to throw in there, mate, or do you think those are the outstanding
I
four?
think they are the outstanding. I think there's got to be a note for Kamara from Villa, 2 games where he's had 3 tackles. Um, I think I've got him in both teams actually. I'd still, just looking at his fixtures: Leicester, Southampton, Leeds, Forest, Chelsea, Fulham, Brentford, Newcastle
I
as the
think I'll be
next few.
sticking with him.
Sticking with him, and there will definitely be some bonus to come out of that because we've seen he can get passing as well, can't he?
Yeah,
Um, he's had passing bonus 3 times, and then he's had tackles bonus. He's only had tackles bonus once actually. No, yeah, he's only had tackles bonus once. But like you said, really, really close. So he does get a good volume of tackles. So definitely want to
well, he's made three
want.
tackles in the last two, hasn't he? So I think it's only a matter of time before he makes four in a game. I don't think that's too far
Yeah,
off.
no, and João Palhinha is just an absolute machine, isn't he, for tackles tiers. Just keeps churning them out. So yeah, they're all really notable enablers. We mentioned Fofana as well, haven't we? He's sort of obviously a defender, but 7.5 to 80 something passes in that game against West Ham. Fulham up next, Liverpool, Palace, Wolves, Villa, Brentford. So a couple of nice fixtures in the middle there. I think he'll prove to be good value, especially when Chelsea stop the leak at the back.
Yeah, definitely. I'll quickly move on then to the game week 6 fixtures. On Saturday the 10th, we got Fulham at home to Chelsea, Southampton at home to Brentford, Liverpool at home to Wolves, Leicester, Villa, Bournemouth, Brighton, and Man City, Tottenham. Just in terms of captaincies, I don't think I'm going to think too deeply about this one, unless I see some tragic news that definitely rules Haaland out from playing. I think I'll just be captaining Haaland on Saturday and not thinking too much about it, really.
Yeah, I think I'll check the polls and see what people are saying for that one. Um, but yeah, I mean, Fulham and Chelsea's a tough game. I don't really want to be putting it on Salah, although I do think Salah could score against Wolves on Saturday. So yeah, I'd be the same as you, Tom. Get murmurings that Haaland's going to play, and then the captaincy poll is heavily geared towards Haaland. Then the armband will go on Haaland.
And then Sunday the 11th, we've got West Ham at home to Newcastle, Arsenal, Everton, and Palace, Man United. I think is another simple one for me, and I'll be giving the armband to Jesus.
Yeah, I will too.
Just other noteworthy captains, I think Nick Pope is probably viable. Not less chance of getting a clean sheet than he would at home, but you'd at least expect him to get some saves bonus. So that you could go for Pope and then maybe Rashford, who he talked about as well. But I think with Jesus' ownership, and I know Everton kept a clean sheet against Liverpool, but Liverpool hit the woodwork a load, and Pickford had the game of his life, I think. So I don't think they'll be able
Yeah,
to
they can do.
keep clean
Yeah.
sheets like that forever. So I do think Jesus is the outstanding one there.
No, and Arsenal played well versus United. A little bit unlucky, weren't they? So I think he's a good shout for that game.
As a United fan, mate, I think they'd have won that game on Sunday if Arteta didn't make the substitutions. If they just kept going as they were, I think they would have scored. And then finally on Monday the 12th, we got Leeds against Forest. And I think we've already spoken about a couple of options for this one, namely Dean Henderson or Tyler Adams. Don't mind
I
Sinistera as well, to be honest.
Yeah.
Any others?
Also, yeah, I saw a question come up, so I'll answer the question now. On Brennan Johnson, is he worth holding? I absolutely think he is because do I th do I think Leeds and Forest score? Probably. So again, it's like what sort of points am I looking at if I've got Henderson or Nico Williams? My concern with Nico Williams is will his tackles dry up somewhat because of the change of fixtures. I mean, he got like smashed the tackles against City and stuff because obviously City have so much possession. He didn't get tackles against Bournemouth, so Um, yeah, if you have Brennan Johnson, I think he's a worthwhile hold and captain for that day for sure. I think, yeah, sorry, you're going off what I think for me anyway. I think I'll be doing Allison to Hendo there. Um, just because the masses are going to be on it. And I think at this current time, it's just with 4 or 5 captaincies, it's worth
I think
it's
it's
worth
just be
holding.
nice to have him in your team as a backup, even if like you have another player like Mitrovic. If Mitrovic doesn't play, gets injured or whatever, you go for Henderson. And on the rest of the two, like against Leicester and Villa, I think Henderson, you might as well just go for him rather than buy someone from Leicester or Villa.
Yeah, what would you do if you just had Brennan Johnson for the Forest run? Would you bring in Hendo as well and then like captain one of them?
So what are their fixtures? So their singles are, well, one of them's not a single, but it's the outstanding captaincy. So it's Leeds, who Johnson could
Yeah,
score against. It's Fulham, who I think Mitrovic is the outstanding captain for. It's
yeah.
Leicester and then Villa, who I don't mind Brennan Johnson actually. If you just want to keep with him,
No,
I think it'd be good enough.
yeah, agreed.
If he
Yeah,
scored, what would you say, 1 goal in those 3 games, I'd be happy with that, wouldn't you?
yeah. Yeah, it's just then you're reliant on Henderson to concede. Otherwise, Henderson's going to come away hauling it anywhere between 9 and 12 points or whatever per game if they keep a clean sheet and he shows some good form. So it's just whether you weigh up in your mind if you feel like the balance there of what you deem is acceptable to lose to Henderson. That's why I'm going to bring him in because I just think it covers against the majority. Stick the armband on him, one transfer, releases funds for further in my team should I need it. It's kind of a bit of a no-brainer. I think the Brennan Johnson owners and non-Henderson owners are in a little bit of a trickier position whether to bring in Hendo as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just going to log into Twitter as well because I'm pretty sure we've got some questions that I didn't have time to put onto the screen as well. So we'll go for the screen ones first. So regular viewer FPL Spartans asks us, he's got 2 questions actually. What to do with Kyle Walker because it looks like Kyle Walker might be injured, not for the long term, but certainly he's got a bit of an injury at the moment. What would you do with Kyle Walker?
Do we have any time frame information on Walker?
I don't think so.
I mean, Tottenham, Wolves, United, Southampton, Liverpool, Arsenal, Brighton. I mean, he's been really good for passing bonus, hasn't he, Kyle Walker this season? He's like smashed the numbers, whereas last season he wasn't quite like getting it consistently. So I think he's been a really good asset. I'd want just some information on the length of time. Obviously, if I knew he was going to be back like fairly soon, then I'll be happy to keep him. But if he was going to be kind of a little bit longer, then I would then be tempted to move on. He's City's second highest scoring defender behind Cancelo, and that's only 4 points difference. He's had 10, 10, 0, 4, 10, 5. So he's had passes tier 2 in every single game except the Newcastle game. So he's absolute nailing the passes. So it's just how long he's out for. I mean, Sky
So
Sports there's a knock
so
estimate.
so Kyle says, so he said he's got a quote in an interview. So he said it was about John Stones as well. So he said John Stones' injury is not too much. Kyle Walker
Yeah,
not too much too, but he doesn't know if he's going to be ready for Saturday or the Dortmund game or the Wolves game after the international break.
it's classic Pep, isn't it? He just doesn't give any information. Well, he's not even in the squad tonight. Obviously, he's gone. Yeah, he's got
Cancelo in the new signing, hasn't he?
and Sergio Gomez at left back. So yeah, I mean, what do they play Saturday late, don't they? So you're gonna have to make a decision before kickoff. Um, first kickoff on
Would you do Kyle Walker to Mitrovic?
if my team allow if my I imagine he'll be on 3 up top. He's yeah. But if he wasn't, Mitrovic or Tony, Tony's got some really nice fixtures. But obviously, as you've said, Tom, Mitrovic covers depending how he's covered for captaincy, or he could go in on one of the enablers and then free up some money elsewhere. It just depends what he's doing with his team. So obviously, you're not going to give him an answer on who to move him to. But I think that sounds like from the quote of just get him out. But then Pep's just weird and wonderful because he just turn up randomly and start. But judging off that, I think I would get be getting rid of him for sure.
And then question two: are there any in inverted commas FPL style players who have suddenly become good Sky FF picks in your opinion? I think we mentioned Rashford, who I think you could class as that. He's not a traditional like Sky bonus magnet player, but I think just because of his attacking output, he's up there. I don't know, Mitrovic and Tony, I think strikers in Sky are always quite good, so I don't think you can necessarily say that. Nothing
No,
comes to
but I
mind
think
other
they
than
are
Rashford,
more. I think
mate,
they are
but
more. I think they are more picked in FBL because of so many of the premium assets being midfielders in FPL. Um, yeah, and so I think that they could possibly be classed in that. Whereas we've got to have like, yeah, yeah. So I think maybe you could class Tony and Mitrovic. And I just remember they've done a bit of reclassifying, haven't they, in Sky this year as well. So now Salah's obviously a midfielder, but yeah, I think you could class those two. Pascal Gross as well. I think people are on the Gross bandwagon in FPL potentially a little bit earlier than Sky.
I think we've already answered Ben's question, but yeah, he says thoughts on McAllister, and is he a good option with the Brentford single game day in mind, or is this another bandwagon move that will go wrong? Obviously, you can't predict the future, right? So it could just all go to pot and he blanks every game going forwards. But I think in the first 6 games we've seen him, like we said, score every kind of point in Sky that you possibly can. I think that makes him automatically a good pick. Um,
Yeah.
I don't think I'd be I don't think I'd be going out of my way to buy him if I was happy with my team. But if there were players that I wanted to get rid of, I'd consider him. I think that's what I'd say about it.
It's very reassuring when you see multiple routes to points via bonus, goals, penalties, free kicks. Like you just know they could always pick up something somewhere. Obviously, based off his non-penalty XG, and if he wasn't a bonus magnet and he wasn't on pens or free kicks, and he still scored 2 goals at the weekend, I don't think there'd be the clamour for him. But Brighton are playing well, and he's got a little bit of substance to him, so I think he's a good pick, and he's a lovely price.
So Josh, I think we've covered this one already. It might have been what you were alluding to yourself just then, mate. But he says he's got Brennan Johnson in one of his teams for the singles, but doesn't think he looks particularly appealing. Is it worth bringing Henderson in goal and then moving Johnson onto someone else? Personally, I think Johnson's quite viable for those games. I really do. I guess it's just your risk appetite as to whether you want to go against the masses on Henderson, or you're happy to stick with Johnson. Personally, I
I
think
think there'd be a split. I do.
yeah.
I think there'd be more weight to Hendo, but I think there's definitely a few Johnson owners that people started with him at the start of the season that would just captain him.
The question I have is, with all the forward signings that Forest have made, I know Brennan was the star for them in the Championship, but I'm just thinking their forward players, they've got like Awoniyi, Lingard, Dennis. There must be others as well. It's just a case of, is Brennan Johnson nailed to start every game for Forest? I think just with the amount of options they have, it's a question. I think if he certainly doesn't perform very well, he's got a chance of being dropped just because of the talent they have in their squad. Whereas Henderson, he's going to have to take something pretty serious for Henderson to be dropped. I think he plays every game in the Prem for them, so I think that's just one to think about.
Yeah, it's the big decision there is we said it earlier. Does he bring in Hendo? I'd keep Johnson for now, but do you bring in Hendo alongside that?
And then FF Dempsey, excuse me, says with Europe starting this week and teams being allowed to use 5 substitutions, does this change your thinking in terms of who we select until the overhaul? What are you thinking?
Um, no, not massively. I don't think. No, I think like teams that are in Europe, their better players are going to play a lot of games in the Premier League and Europe. Look at Salah. You'd imagine Harden would as well. They're all quite highly owned. So unless you start seeing some patterns, but we've used Haaland as an example. Pep could have brought him off numerous games this season at half time, and he's already in double digit hauls. So who's to say if he doesn't start and comes on for the last 30 minutes that he grabs himself a couple of goals and vice versa? Um, People like Salah. Salah's obviously super robust, so plays a lot. maybe the concern would be around potentially like Chelsea players where there's a bit more rotation. So, like I said about earlier, maybe about Fafana or Reece James, if anyone's got him. I think Koulibaly's fairly nailed. So, no, not at the moment. I'm not too. It is not in my thinking. And was it James at Planet FPL? I think he did a little bit of a look, didn't he, at some of the like the impact of the five subs. I don't think it made a huge amount of difference. I might be a
I
bit
can't.
wrong
I
there.
haven't seen any stats on it, but my gut feel and my observation is that it's not had a massive impact yet. But obviously, it's only been one game a week, so you'd feel that with Europe on, that might have more of an impact. Which is, yeah, well, exactly Dempsey's point. So I think it's just one to monitor. I don't think for now it's affecting my decisions, but I'm just monitoring it to see if it will.
Yeah, he's pulled Cancelo off a couple of times, hasn't he? But you've got to think that as a sort of a good thing. But then because he's going to play him regularly, but then the reason he's pulling him off is because of the game volume that's about to happen. So Dempsey's bang on with his point there. It's like you said, it's just monitoring it, but it's not a worry for me because some of these players that he's talking about are amazing Sky assets that can do damage in short amounts of time and a good captaincy option. So it's the risk to reward ratio at the moment. It's worth the risk.
Luke Notley, I have the same problem, and I think I've got a plan. But he says brought Harvey Barnes in, sick of him already, bin him off, and should I bin him off and cut my losses? I certainly will be. The only thing you've got to think about is the captaincy against Forest. I think he's a good option on that day, but Leicester don't look very good. So yeah, I don't feel like I should also hold a player for a game post international break either. Even though, well, Barnes definitely won't be selected for England, will he? So I think he's quite safe to have over that period. But yeah, I'll be selling him for Fafana. I think that's what I'll be doing this weekend.
Yeah, nice mate.
Okay, and then our good mate from fan team Josh asks us fave Forest slash Leeds assets for the single game day. I think we already covered that. I think we got Henderson. What did we say? Henderson, Brennan Johnson, Tyler Adams, maybe Sinistera as well.
Nico Williams done well so far as well. Good attacking stats as well as bonus.
If you had no one, who would you bring in?
That's the boat I'm in right now. I haven't got anyone. And it just makes sense from a hop off Allison, hop onto Hendo for me.
Yeah, I agree. I
Allison hasn't.
completely agree.
It might be a different question if Allison was hauling at the 12 pointers, like again, like last season repeatedly, but he hasn't been. So it's just downgrade Allison to Henderson, stick the armband on Hendo for those games, focus on the rest of the team.
And I think if I didn't have anyone, I think I would definitely buy a Forest player because they have so many single game days that you'll always have cover for those days if you have a
Yeah.
Forest player. It
Yeah.
sounds like might be the boring move, but I think it's the right one with so many singles.
Agreed.
We had a couple of questions via DM as well. First one being, am I mad to go without Henderson for the singles? He's thinking of going Allison to Pope on Sunday and then just leave him to the World Cup. He says he knows Henderson will likely pick up saves, but Forest look woeful. Pope is a save magnet with great fixtures. He's got Gibbs White for Monday, wondering if that's a good option. Then he's going to go for Mitrovic on Friday, and then planning to go Madison for captain against Villa. Madison for captain for Forest v Leicester, and then he potentially skip the Villa game and assess nearer the time. I think we sort of
Yeah,
discussed that as an
I like
option.
that.
I think it works.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that.
He's obviously thought
Sure.
about it, and it's one of those where I don't think I could possibly talk someone out of that. I think that's definitely viable.
That's quite legit. I like the sound of that.
And then Steve Cheek, he says, question for the pod. If Salah blanks versus Wolves, do we persist with him? He says it feels like Kane at the beginning of last season where he's just keeping him out of fear. Yeah, what do you think? Would you sell Salah or are you going to keep him?
So it was Dave, wasn't it, last season? Was it Dave that like played aggressively in those sorts of moments where he went Son against the grain and when Son was hauling? It's just down to your how you play the game, isn't it? We probably both said we're just going to hold Salah unless a really good opportunity comes up with someone who I can replace him with. who would offer me captaincy and that explosive return, I'll be keeping him because I wouldn't want to distribute those funds because the worry is Salah hits form and then you've got to make two or three moves to get
And
Salah back in. But
and
I
the
think
thing
there's a
for me
flip
is
side to that, Tom.
I haven't made a wild card team yet, but and I won't think of it now, but I think the best team in Sky at the moment doesn't involve spending all the money or even close to it. So,
Yeah.
um, selling Salah to save budget or whatever, I don't think is actually worth it because there are so many cheap
No,
players that are good.
and Salah's a midfielder, and actually where we want our positions at the moment is up front. So if Salah was a striker, I think it'd be a
Yeah.
different answer. But because he's not, there isn't quite the explosive return ability in that midfield like there is up front at the moment. So see how he gets on at Wolves, Tom, and then go from there. Because I think, like I said earlier, if there's ever an opportunity to jump off Salah, those next four games are a real good opportunity. You've just got to find someone who you think can smash Salah's um, potential points return in those 4 or 5 games.
I think most of the questions we've already discussed. Actually, thank you to I'm gonna leave Mitch, David Martinez, and SkyFF Jake have asked questions that I think we've already discussed. So thank you for your
Yeah,
questions, but hopefully we've just generally discussed them on the pod and answered them through what we said already. One final question from you. Got time to do one more? You good for one more?
yeah. I was gonna just on that quick David one. Who would you? He's asked which of Zaha, Gross, Rashford, or Ake would you bring in this week to hold till overhaul? He's just asked it now. I don't know if you've seen that. It's quite a. I know we've discussed the three of the four there. Who would you go for? I think that's quite an interesting one.
Zaha.
Would you?
I think so. Just because he's hurt me every time I've owned him, but out of the four, I think Gross is also nailed, but I think out of the four he's the most nailed, along with Gross. He takes penalties as well. And did we say he's got a decent looking fixture run coming up as well when Brighton don't?
Yeah, he's got a couple of tricky fixtures, and then he goes into a really nice run. Where Overhaul fits in that, I'm not off the top of my head. I'm not entirely sure, but I think he's a good pick, Tom.
But I
Till
think if
then,
you're going for Zaha price, if you've got 9.1 million, I would just pick Rodri. I think I might be going for Rodri for Dyer myself, to be honest, but Rodri is just the Sky FF boring pick, but he gets 5 points every game, and I think if you go into the price of Zaha and you've got a bit over, go for Rodri in my opinion. I think he's just underlooked every season, isn't he? But he's so good.
yeah, you're right, mate.
And
Yeah,
he's the question
he's
mark
a
I
he's
had was
so
whether
consistent.
yeah, I was going to say the question mark I had was whether he could match the attacking returns he got last season, but he's already got 2 assists, so I think the answer is yes to that.
Yeah, and he totals like 90, 100 passes a game, doesn't he? So he's just five. And because he doesn't get affected via how many goals have been conceded, it's just like his baseline at nine. Is he 9-1 or 9-7?
Rodri's 9.1.
Yeah, so 9-1, his baseline's 5 points. I mean, he isn't ceiling isn't massively above that, but like you said, it's just so consistent.
And then one final question, which I can certainly relate to. Neil asks us, he's had a nightmare of a start and he's sat at 80k with 7 transfers already used. Would you just give it up as a bad job now or carry on? I'm in the same position, mate. I'm disheartened by what's happened at the start of the season, but I know that I don't think any of my decisions have been terrible. I think I've just got unlucky with the picks. Like I said at the start, I went Son over Kane, Koulibaly, who punished me. Didn't have Haaland, captain Salah instead of Haaland. I think all of those are reasonable decisions. The outcome just didn't go in my favour. And I imagine the same has happened with you because I know you're an engaged Sky manager and know the score with the game. So I would carry on. And I think later in the season, we both just have to look for opportunities to make up ground. But for now, I think you can quite happily, even at 80k, I think even if you pick the popular players till the overhaul, you could tick yourself into a top 10k, top 5k position just by beating players who either give up on the game or just spunk all their transfers pointlessly.
It's really condensed in points at the moment, as we looked at before. and it is the waters are muddied via players that are spanking the transfers. Of course, it's always good Sky managers that get a good start. We all know a handful of them, but even then, there's still a long way to go. So don't give up. Play sensibly. I did that exact thing last year, so I feel like I'm coming from a good point of experience
Yeah.
where my team was bang out of it for so long, and I just basically started picking players that weren't even really what I call good differentials, and I still finished top K even with that. And I missed the Salah hat trick. I didn't put the captaincy on him, and all these sorts of like just things that kind of went against me. Some of it my fault. And I still got like a top 1K finish for that team. Had I have actually just focused on it properly, not made those silly differential moves that I wouldn't normally make if I was higher in the rankings, I probably would have had a better finish. So yeah, I wouldn't be worried at all.
Okay, that's the end of our questions, mate. I think that does us quite nicely for time. We just ticked over an hour there. You happy to end it there? Anything else you wanted to add?
Yeah,
Oh, we
do
got
we
the mini
have
league,
the
haven't we?
Golden Goal mini league? I'm
The
seeing some
Golden
familiar
Goal Mini League. Who's winning the biscuits? So top of that league at the moment, we've got you and Angus, who I think on the last pod we showed this leaderboard, he was top then as well.
names.
So he's had a few weeks up there on 595 points. He's absolutely flying. No idea how many transfers he's used, but he's got the points. So yeah, it's his place to lose now. So well done, Ewan.
Five weeks in, it's pressure on him, mate. It's his to
Pressure's
lose.
on.
Only got another, Sky like 40 odd game weeks, but you can't lose it from here, mate. Those biscuits, mate. You can probably taste them already.
In second place, we've got Sean Rawlings. In third, Anthony Woodrow. Fourth, a guy we know quite well, Luke Notley. Well done, Luke. You've had an excellent start by the looks of it. Ross, I'm gonna butcher this name. Sorry, mate. Ross McAlpine. In fifth, Thomas Connor in sixth, Mark Stevenson in seventh, Mitchell Gregson in eighth. I think this might be the Mitch that asked us a question on Twitter. If it is, well done, mate. Dean
If
Hicks.
it is, we'll change the answer.
Yeah, you could ask us. We can
Saying
ask
that
you
we're
the
both
question.
like on 10K and you're 16K, so actually he listens to our answer and then don't do what we say. It's probably the better result. Dean Hicks at 9.
Yep. And then
Yeah,
Samuel in tenth. So
yeah.
65 points between first and tenth, which is excuse me, quite a big gap actually. But again, Ewan, I want to know how many transfers you've used because I'm questioning how you've got that many points so far. But like we said, you've got the points in hand now, and it's people to catch you up. So well done, mate. And yeah, hope you can keep it up.
Good.
So yeah, I think that does end us quite nicely now. Yeah, anything else to mention?
No, that's everything, mate, I think.
Sorry, I was dealing a choking incident then. Okay, yeah. If you like what you saw, give us a like rating, subscribe to our channel, and we will catch you next week with another Sky video. See you later.